guys, so let's get started on our chapter 4 notes. So lesson 1, so this chapter is all about inequalities, which if you guys will remember before break, I talked about how inequalities are very, very similar to equations, which we just got done with. The only difference is that instead of an equal sign, we have an inequality symbol, which we're going to talk about right now. So first things first, what is an inequality? An inequality is a mathematical sentence that compares expressions. So an inequality is a mathematical sentence that compares expressions. And like I said, it contains symbols. So these are the 4 inequality symbols that you will see. And to write an inequality, we have to identify certain key phrases that tells us which inequality symbol we're going to be using. So there are 4 symbols. This first one right here, key phrases that we will see when we're using this symbol is greater than. This is our greater than symbol. So for instance, if the sentence was 7 is greater than 6, this is the symbol you would use. The other key phrase that you will see is more than. So 10 is more than 5. All right, our second symbol is the complete opposite. It's less than. Which makes sense because if you think about it, you're really just flipping the 2 signs. So you're flipping, you're doing the opposite. And then the second key phrase with this is fewer than. Our other 2 signs, if you guys notice, they have these little lines underneath them. And so that means that, so it's the same symbol as the 2 that we just saw. The lines just add something in, and what they add in is or equal to. So these signs with these little, whenever you see the line underneath, you know that that also includes or equal to. So for instance, again, we're using the same sign that we just used right here. So again, it is the same, is less than. But this time we're adding in or equal to. So is less than or equal to. Another key phrase that you'll see is at most. So for instance, if I said that the letter X is at most 9, that would mean that X could be any number less than 9 and including 9 itself, but it cannot be anything greater than 9. So if you're saying at most 9, that includes the 9. So that's why you have to say or equal to, because you're including the number that you're ending with. So beforehand, you would say is less than 9. That could include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And now you're including that 9 as an option as well. The last one that we'll use here that we'll see is no more than. So if you said my lunch is no more than $10, that could still include that your lunch equals $10. It just can't be anything over $10. So it couldn't be $10.01. It can be $10, it just cannot be anything over that. So our last symbol is the greater than symbol, which means it's the 2 phrases that we used over here, the first place are the same, except now we're including that equal to again because of that little line underneath. So this is greater than or equal to. Another key phrase that we'll see is at least. If something is at least 5, that could be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on. But it could be 5. That's where that or equal to comes in. And then last but not least is no less than. So if I said my lunch is no less than $5, it could include $5, right? It just can't be anything under $5. It couldn't be $4.99. It has to at least be that $5. So make sure you guys have all these written down, and then feel free to come back to this list as we go on through our practice problems and lessons today to see if you guys need a little bit refresher. And this is something that's going to be really important, that we keep our notes organized, and we always have this little table so that we can come back when we're trying to study for quizzes or tests or even doing homework at home, that we can go back to this list and get help. So now that we know what our inequality signs are, we can write out our own inequalities. So this is asking us to write an inequality for this sentence. So it says a number Q plus 5 is greater than or equal to negative 7.9. So if you guys remember, whenever we see this, a number Q, that's asking for a variable, and it's telling us that our variable is Q, a number Q. So if I want to write this as a word sense, I know I'm just going to bring down this Q because it's saying our variable is Q. And then plus 5. So I'm kind of just breaking this down step by step. I know that plus 5 means to add, so I'm going to say Q plus 5. And then our second part, it says is greater than or equal to. Is greater than or equal to. So if I scroll back up, if I don't know this off the top of my head, if I scroll all the way back up, I know is greater than or equal to is the last one that we have up here where the little mouth is pointing to the left. So I have is greater than or equal to negative 7.9. I'm going to put a little dash right here so we don't get confused between the 7 and our inequality sign. And so that's our inequality sentence right there. Q plus 5 is greater than or equal to negative 7.9. Okay? So one way that I like to remember if it's less than or equal to, whatever sentence I'm using right here, if it's saying greater than or equal to, I know it's this symbol because, and I like to think of it as like a little alligator or like a little mouth. Its mouth is pointing to the bigger item because it's really hungry and it wants to eat that bigger item. So that's kind of a trick that I use and I remember it. Otherwise, if it was Q plus 5 is less than negative 7.9, now this end of the mouth right here is pointing to this. That's saying it's less than, because otherwise the mouth would be pointing at the item. So just kind of a way that when I was in school that I learned, and it seems helpful. You know, if you have a hungry alligator, its mouth is going to be wide open at what is bigger, so the greater than. Okay, so on your own, I'm going to go ahead and pause this video so you guys can try to write your own equalities right here. So a number x is at most negative 10, and then twice a number y is more than negative 5/2. Okay, so number 1, a number x, so a number x, we know that our variable is x, is at most. So if it's at most negative 10, I'm going to put my negative 10 right here because I know that's the other part of the inequality sentence. If I know something is at most 10, that means that whatever x is, it can't be anything greater than 10 because we're saying at most. So for instance, if we're saying my lunch today can only be at most $10, that means it couldn't be 11, it couldn't be 15 because you only brought $10 to school. But it could be anything less than 10 or equal to 10. If you're saying something is at most 10, that can still include that 10. So I know right away my x is going to be less than negative 10, and I also know that I'm going to be including that negative 10 into my equation. Number 2, twice a number y is more than negative 5/2. So first I want to write out twice number y, which is just 2y, is more than negative 5/2. So whatever, it doesn't even matter what my variable is. So all I am saying here is that anything times, anything twice, any number times 2 is going to be greater than or more than negative 5/2. So I know it has to be more than, and since it's greater, it's the bigger item, I want to make sure my little alligator mouth or whatever analogy you guys are thinking of is pointing to the greater item. And because it doesn't have an or equal to, I'm not going to put that line underneath because it does not include the 5/2. It has to be more than. It does not include the 5/2 though.